Other interesting political news, you have the United Auto Workers. They want the same benefits that led to the bankruptcy of General Motors and Chrysler back in 2009. Now, this is in the political section of the podcast, partially because the UAW is a huge political influence. They donate more to politicians than we could possibly fathom. Again, something I think is unfair about unions when you're coerced or you're forced to join them in some instances. They're putting a lot of their funding, they don't give it to the union dues you're paying. They're not going to fellow union members, or if a union member gets sick, it's not going to take care of him. They're sending it to politicians. More often than not, politically on the left. And the politicians, in turn, usually give them big contracts. They bail them out when they go bankrupt. It's one of those dirty secrets, or not so dirty. It's a little dirty secret that not a lot of people talk about. It's one of those things where it's very notorious, especially like the teachers' unions. You have all these cities where the teachers' unions will donate hundreds of millions of dollars to politicians. Then they get elected. Then in turn, they give the teachers all raises. It seems morally vacuous, and I would tend to agree with that statement. And yet, I don't see a lot of public support to stop it, unfortunately. So the reason it's in the politicians, famously, the UAW helped elect many politicians throughout history. Now, the contract expires September 14th, and there's nearly 150,000 members of the United Auto Workers that work at the Big Three. Now, the Big Three are known as the Detroit Big Three. You have General Motors, you also have Chrysler, as well as Ford. Although, ironically, Ford isn't even headquartered in Detroit. They're over in Auburn Hills, Michigan. Nice, safe suburb up north. General Motors is in Detroit. They're braver than most. It's that city. A good fascinating cultural instance where there was one time in history when Detroit was the richest, most prosperous city on the planet. Times have certainly changed. Now, the contract with the Big Three expires September 14th, and they recently voted where, we are willing to strike. So it's not 100% certain that's going to be a strike, but it's showing that the members of the union are in favor of a strike or a shutdown. Now, the 6 things they want in particular are: 1, the elimination of wage tiers, which is similar to how the Teamsters came through for the UPS workers recently to avoid strike. Now, these wage tiers, and again, this is as far as my understanding, it is an instance where once you join a union or you get hired on, you have a lower tier because you just started. And then you have a higher tier, usually not based on your actual performance or doing good, but more often than not is tenure. So just work there long enough and you get upgraded and you get paid more, which someone who's I'm capitalist, I like the free market, I'm kind of against, just rewarding people for just existing. But that's just my 3 cents in that instance. And it's one of those things that doesn't seem, I don't know how this, it'll be interesting that they want the elimination of wage tiers. It'll exponentially increase the cost of wages because instead of realistically, again, it means the company's only going to hire someone who has a very tenured career because they're mandated with the contract. If they get their way, you got to pay the new person just as much as the person who's been there for 20 years. Well, if that's the case, if you hire someone who doesn't have the skill set, like someone who's just graduating college or just graduated high school and they don't have a lot of automotive experience, well, you can't afford to pay them that big wage because they don't have the skill set to have the output, the production to hit that wage. Very similar to these arbitrary minimum wage laws, where if you don't have the skill set, the company's losing money on that person, which in most instances is not viable. You can certainly invest in new employees, which, every new hire you usually lose money for the first few months as you're training them and they're becoming more productive. But let's get back to their list of audacious demands. The second thing they want is double-digit pay raises. Jesus, double digits? Never in my life have I had that. Double-digit pay raises. Now, it's almost as if they're a hungry big guy at a diner. I'm trying to think of a pejorative scenario appropriate enough, but they see kind of like perhaps a greedy, a fish? No. A donkey? Yeah, maybe. But they're seeing these companies make record profits. However, they're not seeing these companies need to pivot because they need to change because they're redefining the whole company. GM is going to become full electric by 2030 for Cadillac brand, and then by 2035 for the whole company. That's going to take billions in reinvestment, not just in hiring engineers for research and development, but the physical infrastructure like the actual factories. But I digress. They want double-digit pay raises. That's not happening in this economy. They want a restoration of cost of living adjustments. They might get that. That, depending on the contract and the actual percentage amount, it's GM, Ford, and Chrysler, they might acquiesce to that if it's a small percentage. Most businesses do have something similar to that where the wage does increase year over year. 4, oh geez, this is not happening. They want pension benefits for all employees, including new hires. Hell no. There's no, I can't fathom that. There's no way they can afford this. These companies, that's not fathomable. That was one of the major reasons these companies went bankrupt in 2009. I mean, pensions are basically gone. Back in the day, they were very popular and they're a great idea. Don't get me wrong, but in this hyper-competitive industry, there's no way they're going to have pensions for all employees, including new hires. Again, I have a sample size in Texas in terms of businesses. I own an IT company. When I'm interacting with businesses, I have anecdotal evidence about 400 businesses in Texas where I've had touch points and I've researched them. Actually, no, by this time it's 800. I know one private sector business that has a pension plan. It's an old school distributor. One. No one has it in the private sector because it's not competitive. So they want pension benefits. Another audacious thing they want, reestablish retiree medical benefits. Terrible cost. Again, when you look at the pie graph of why the GM, so most of my background just because I was a fan of GM in terms of products and their old leadership, I was admirer of many of their capabilities, and they used to make some of the best sports cars on the planet. You know, affordable, stick shift, 3 pedals, as manual transmission as every sports car should be. Nonetheless, they've acquiesced to making boring vehicles mostly, but that's one of the major reasons they went bankrupt in 2009. The pensions and the medical benefits. Medical, United States, is usually very expensive. Many people attribute that to the ever interconnected relationships with the government and the medical industry. A lot of people will argue that the price would be a lot cheaper if it was more competitive and it was more free market. Another topic for another time, perhaps. But they want to reestablish retiree medical benefits, which, again, that's going to be hugely expensive. They also want, so that's number 5. Number 6, they want the right to strike over plant closures. That's not happening. And at 65, they've noted that 65 plants have closed in the past 2 decades. Because you cost so much money, perhaps, as well as the U.S. government having anti-competitive rules and regulations in place. You can't, gone are the days where you pay someone $65 an hour to put a tire in a car, which they were when they went bankrupt in back in 2009. Again, some people in the comments last week, and I will further clarify, that statistic is based on their healthcare benefits as well as their hourly wage. All that matters at the end of the day is that big number because that's the number that costs the shareholders, that's the number that costs the customers. To buy a GM vehicle on average, the study was about 36 months ago, a couple years back, it's about $2,000 more. That's how much you're paying for that unionized car. That's not competitive. The most reliable cars on the planet, they're made by companies that don't have unions. And I know, there are many variables that go into that. Not only is it the labor or the quality of labor, in which some instances, like Japanese culture, you have Kaizen and Toyota, in which they always want to improve the product, and their culture is a good example of Toyota. They have an assembly line. If there's an issue with the Toyota, they stop the assembly line, they fix the issue there. GM and these other competitors, they see an issue, they just go, keep going assembly line. McDonald's it. Bam, bam, bam. And maybe we'll fix it when it gets to the end. More often than not, but yeah, I can't help but notice the most reliable cars, Tesla, they're not unionized. In fact, they actually give their employees stock options. I think if you're truly invested in a company, I think these companies should do that. Granted, the union will always want more. If they weren't unionized, I would say there would be an incentive to give them stock options. But Tesla, they give their employees stock options, so they're invested in the company. They want to work like hell. They don't want to just sit around and put a minimum effort because the reward system is based on how the company does Tesla, not based on how many years they sit in the same position. Now, look at Honda. They make some of the best cars on the planet. Honda Civic Si, awesome. 3 pedals, manual transmission, as every car should have. Those cars consistently will last a quarter of a century, as well as 1 million miles. Same with Toyota. All those cars are phenomenal. And again, this is increasing the cost of goods sold, and right now they're not as reliable. So they want to reestablish their right to strike when, again, it's not just the union. There are many legal reasons why you move factories. The U.S., I also blame Republicans, Democrats. The government does make it prohibitive to build many products in the United States. So that's another thing I want to do. We want the right to strike over plant closures, which again, that'll put them in the same issue of Radio Shack. Now, when Radio Shack first went bankrupt, they were saved by American General. But a contingency of them being saved, the new company said, you are not allowed to close stores. That's terrible because some of the stores were losing money. And in order to be profitable, you have to have the stores that are making you money. If you have a factory that's old and you're losing money year after year, you have to close it or sell it off. There's only so much you can do to increase profitability of some of the instances. So that's going to be problematic as well. Now, the seventh thing they want, which is, from a negotiation point, ridiculous. They want, quote unquote, significant increases in retiree pay, unquote. Now, I say partially ridiculous for two things. One, you're already retired. Again, that pension is going to bankrupt these companies again. But two, that's not a quantifiable number. And I go, perhaps some of the ambiguities to help with negotiations. And again, they're going to argue that it's a negotiation. This is the top thing they want. They know they're not going to get it all. My 3 cents is, you're at a pivotal moment in the automotive community. These companies, they're not doing great. Ford, they're probably the best in terms of they've never gone bankrupt officially, partially because they took out a big loan at a convenient time during 2009 or the 2008 crash. But they're all trying to transition to new products that are not profitable. They will be eventually. Most investments will eventually become profitable if you do it right. Look at Tesla. They lost money for years, but they're building out the infrastructure. And with economies of scale, you can divide that cost over many units made. So right now, Ford is losing money on the E-Mach, also known as the bastardized Mustang. It has nothing to do with the Mustang, but they named it a Mustang anyway. Marketing fail. Maybe D-, give them a little credit. But these companies are losing money on these vehicles. But the union is just seeing them making billions on paper. That being said, they need the money for 2 reasons, I would argue, right now. One, reinvest in the company, as well as their transformation. My 3 cents is it might bankrupt one of them, just because, again, EV takes a long time to make profitable. I'm not saying it can't be done. Some companies have a successful track record of doing that. But you look at GM, most of the profit GM makes is from SUVs, crossovers, trucks. Those are the things that are going to turn into EV. The money right now is coming from internal combustion engine trucks. They have, so in GM's credit, they did announce about the $927 million investment into the V8. Perhaps the best thing GM's ever done is the V8, the internal combustion engine, 8 cylinders pumping away, because they know they're going to need those trucks to make them money. Same thing with Ford. Ford is making money from Ford Blue. Ford is divided into 3 companies. Ford Blue, which is the one you and I love, the Mustang with 3 pedals, great vehicle. The Ford F-150, the original one. That's the old company, or the legacy Ford. Then you have Ford Commercial, which is the big trucks, the F-350, 450, 550, whatever they make these days. And there's all the commercial vans. That makes sense. Then you have the Ford E, which is their EV branch or subsidiary. That part of the company is bleeding money. So Ford Blue is making money, but that profit is being put back into the other company because they believe that, and I was going to say, due to government regulations, the market is moving that way. The consumer preferences be damned, but they're reinvesting all that money there. And again, this is a very competitive industry. Investing in just making one vehicle is a huge risk. You're talking billions of dollars because, again, there are some parts sharing, which helps decrease the cost, but it's a huge gamble to come out with a new vehicle, and their competitors don't have this slowing them down. Tesla isn't scared they're going to have a strike tomorrow because their employees are invested in the company. They're shareholders in the stock. I would almost argue, and again, I don't know if this is possible, well, in negotiation, perhaps anything is possible, but almost come to the table and say, hey, disband the union. We're going to have a direct relationship with you. We're not going to have a divorce lawyer, which is kind of the pejorative term I use for these union relationships, where that one person's whole incentive structure is to have conflict because they can prove their job and their worth. But have a direct relationship. Say, hey, we're going to have a huge transformation. If you believe in what you're doing and your merit, we're going to give you stock options. We're going to incentivize you to work like hell to have our companies be successful. I think that's what they need to do right now because, again, it's a hyper-competitive industry, and just a couple wrong moves can cause bankruptcy. So let me know in the comments, do you think they're going to get all of their wants? Do you think it'd be better to almost have a whole reapproach where you give them stock options or reinvest? But again, these are going to be huge cost. And there's always a silver lining if you squint hard enough in life. This will perhaps help with maybe it'll decrease on the employee turnover. Although that being said, if you're in a union, like once you get in, you usually stay in there for life. It'll be interesting to see what Mary Barra, the CEO of General Motors, and Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford, as well as the CEO of Chrysler, which again they're also not, they're owned by Stellantis overseas. But it'll be interesting to see. But this is a very precarious time. I can't help but think this is a contributing factor why Warren Buffett halved his investment in General Motors. He had about 40 million shares via his investment firm Berkshire Hathaway. It went from 40 million shares, I believe, to 22 million shares of General Motors. And Warren Buffett is the best investor in history, with the exception of Nancy Pelosi's husband, who just happens to know better than the Oracle of Omaha. Although, yeah, totally coincidence that his wife works in the government and controls the laws that dictate everything. I'm sure it's totally coincidence. They don't talk at all. But in all seriousness, that's a huge that's a huge blow in confidence or decrease in confidence if Warren Buffett is halving his investment in your company when Warren Buffett has a astronomically success track in terms of picking these companies that, again, he looks for long-term tangible investments as well as he also believes in some technology. He's warmed up one of the biggest shareholders of Apple, actually. But I think people are, when I asked on LinkedIn, I did a poll, what are the 3 reasons you think Warren Buffett pulled out or he decreased his stake in the company? And I asked, the union contract coming up, the union costs. I asked the EV transformation. And actually a fair amount of people said the EV transformation was their main concern, followed by the union concern with the contract coming up. And those are 2 big things that are going to shape these companies for quite some time. Again, if the cost of labor goes up, they're already losing money on these EV vehicles. If they keep increasing the price, again, over time, EVs go down in price, but they're usually twice as much as an internal combustion engine. Now, Elon Musk will brag that his, $50,000 vehicle was the same as the average vehicle in the U.S., but that average vehicle price in the U.S. also includes EVs from other companies. But if you're a family who needs something that's going to last a quarter of a century, you're going to buy an internal combustion engine because that's what's most reliable with the technology we have today. So the interesting to see, let me know in the comments, do you think this will make or break the big 3? Well, I can't imagine. Let me know, what do you think is the upside of the situation? If GM and the big 3 said, hey, we're going to give you everything you want, what would that do to the companies? Would it make the product cheaper? It's not going to make the product cheaper for the customer. I don't see the silver lining from that perspective. And again, these companies are struggling. GM, they laid off a bunch. They gave voluntary payouts to a lot of corporate executives and a lot of corporate, pretty much if you worked at the headquarters, they're trying to buy you out of your contract or your salary position because they're trying to decrease costs to compete with the Teslas of the world. That's a huge feat. And in the time they're trying to decrease every cost, this may very well be one of the largest costs that's going to hit their books. Let me in the comments, do you think they're going to agree to all these? Are they going to just agree to a strike? What will the future hold for the big 3 and the UAW? In 2023, is the United Auto Workers, are they still worth it? Are they going to help these companies succeed, or will they be the detriment to their existence? Time shall tell. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear, if you're a UAW member, I'd love to hear your feedback. In terms of my family and coming from the Midwest and up north, I've had some folks throughout the years who have worked in management and other positions at GM. So I'd love to hear what you have to say in terms of your experiences, what your thoughts are, and I'll share them in a later video. Your thoughts and your input are most appreciated. Thank you everyone for taking the time to tune in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Trying to get to 3,000 subscribers by the end of August. Greatly appreciate your assistance. Also, your comments help the channel grow and develop, as well as it helps me slow down my speech and make the show better and better, as that was a previous critique, which I've taken to heart and something I've worked on more and more. Also, don't forget to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, heck, tell your enemies, tell anyone and everyone. Just stay safe, fight the good fight.